So this is a bit different video than I'm used to making. This is going to be a review on the ThrustMaster T300RS. This is the Alcantara edition, the Ferrari one. Doesn't matter, it's all the same. It's just the steering wheel cosmetics are different. So I've had this wheel for 6 years. I have a couple thousand hours on it. So I would like to go over some pros and cons, and I think I can give some insights that you wouldn't normally get from a review where it's just straight out of the box on topics such as durability, reliability, and what I've had to do over the past 6 years to maintain and keep it working. I will say, just real quick, for $300 to me, from the wheels that I have tried, I haven't tried them all, of course, this one is fantastic. I mean, they've hit the price point perfectly with this setup. But of course, there are some things that you wish were better, and I hope to hit on some of those things. So we're going to start with the pedals and work our way up so I don't have to keep coming in and out from underneath my table. First things first, I wear socks. I don't go barefooted. I think that's disgusting. Personal opinion. And then I don't wear shoes, and we'll go over why I don't wear shoes. And why wouldn't you, if you can, wear your lucky E36 M-Tech Rain socks or your lucky E30 socks when you're sim racing? I mean, just why wouldn't you? So on to the pedals. These are pedals. Not much to say about them. There's just a couple very important points I want to go over. First of all, these are plastic, and I was hesitant on that, but as you can see, no chips, nothing, no cracks. The mounting holes haven't sheared. The pedals have been fantastic. There is a bit of smoothness from where my heel has worn away the grip. However, I don't think you need grip here at all. As you're just pivoting, my heels never slide. I can't wear shoes, and I have to wear socks because I find that the way that the gas pedal is created, your foot naturally just needs to be able to slide on the pedal as you're going. So if your foot sticks to it, to me, that's very uncomfortable. I'm sure there's people out there who are the exact opposite and can't play with socks on and have to wear shoes. But me personally, socks are a must on this setup. The overall biggest con for these pedals is the grip on the bottom, or lack thereof. These rubber guys are gonna scratch the hell out of your wood floor. So if you're playing on wood floor, I would recommend throwing down a pad, kind of like you can use, I use a SteelSeries QCK Heavy mouse pad. And I stick it on the ground and put this on top so that if this does slide, it's sliding on the pad and not your wood floor. Compared, I think the G25 had like flip down spikes for carpet, and that would be much appreciated, as this thing just slides around a carpet like crazy. Which is why I have my Battlestar Galactica box set and an ammo can to push up against. Because everybody will know, if you're going into turn 1 Monza, for example, 210 miles per hour, 220 miles per hour, and you slam on your brake, if it moves like it is right now, your braking won't be consistent, and it's just going to piss you off. Pisses me off. So that's the biggest flaw, is that it just moves around. The second biggest flaw is they came this way, so this is not something that's changed over time, and there's no way to recalibrate these. But you'll notice on the brake pedal, when I'm pushing pretty hard, it's got a pretty strong spring on it, which feels very nice. But this is like, I'm like hitting a wall. Right here, there's a wall. And that is, when you open up the calibration utility, this reads 100% brake pressure. But you'll notice there's an extra 10-15% of travel at the end that doesn't do anything. So you hit 100%, you push through it, and it's still 100%. And you have to get used to this, especially when you're running no ABS, because you're full brake, and then you need to bleed off the brakes as you lose downforce so that you don't lock up your tires. But you start to bleed off, and you're not actually bleeding off in the last 15% of travel. You're still at 100%, and now you're starting to bleed off. So that's something you just have to get used to. I've gotten used to just hitting 100% instead of going all the way down. I hit that spot pretty consistently now. To me, that's a con, but you get used to it. They have a stopper that you can put at the back here. It's like a little rubber cone that limits the travel, and I think it's supposed to simulate a car that doesn't have a brake booster, but to me it doesn't feel at all like a car without a brake booster. So I personally don't run that option. Once again, I'm sure there's people who like it, but to me it's not realistic at all, and just removes any feel that you have from the pedal. Last thing to mention is the saturation. I don't understand. The pedal is not linear at all. So the first like 20% will bring your throttle up to about 50%. And then the last bit, it kind of dies off. So in all of my racing games, I run 50% or more saturation, or it makes it more linear, so that it's 10% of travel is 10% of throttle. 50% of travel is 15% of throttle. So that's just something that you guys have to play around with, finding out the correct saturation point for you, especially when you're playing these new turbo era F1 games. They have so much torque down low that you really need a lot of feel and play in the first 50% of the throttle, or else you're just going to be spinning up the rear tires. But yeah, overall, I'm very happy with the setup. I mean, there's not much to complain about except for the two huge flaws. I think it's held up perfectly fine. No bending in the plastic, no cracks, nothing. I've had no issues with these pedals. I enjoy that you can adjust these, set them where you like them, and then you're good. Last thing to mention is I'm very happy that it comes with the clutch pedal. Because this setup doesn't come with a shifter, if you are driving, say, an E36 M3 in a Assetto Corsa and you're trying to downshift while braking, you can't because you don't have the shifter, and if you didn't have a clutch pedal, then you wouldn't be able to do it smoothly. You wouldn't be able to heel toe or anything. So personally, I would not buy a setup that doesn't have a clutch pedal. It helps a lot in like rally games, rallycross games, because you need to be able to slip the clutch in certain corners, and being able to launch is important. So personally, I wouldn't buy a setup that doesn't have a clutch pedal. On to the steering wheel. So the first thing to mention about the steering wheel is that the Alcantara has held up pretty well. However, compared to your regular leather, or I don't know what other coverings they use, this soaks up sweat like no other. This is from 2 days, so probably like 3 to 6 hours worth of racing. And I didn't clean it. I normally wipe it down after every use, and you can just see that it's dirty. I do have sweaty hands, so most of the time I wear gloves, but this time I purposely didn't, just so you could see how dirty it gets. You can see this looks hard and smooth versus a part that I never touched. This is nice and soft and, you know, has grain to it. However, functionally, I noticed zero difference. So that's not necessarily con, just something that you need to consider. You have a nicer wrap around your steering wheel, you need to take care of it. The buttons have not deteriorated at all, especially this guy. I was a little worried about this guy. I use this for fuel mixture up, fuel mixture down, and then my start button. So I'm using this, you know, multiple times every single lap, and it has not worn down at all. It still springs back just like it did before. It has just enough grip for me to quickly do it without slipping, and I really like it. The paddles are not static. I hate static paddles. I think they should always move with the steering wheel, unless you're driving a car that you actually need more than, say, 480 degrees of rotation. Then I kind of understand it's always in the same place. But for most racing, you don't really turn your wheel more than, let's say, 190 degrees in one direction, so 400 total. Something else I like is the paddles have held up, the switches in them have held up extremely well, and the click, the actuation, is when you pull it almost all the way back. This makes it extremely useful if you're using this as your clutch to launch, so that it actuates as soon as you let go of the paddle. It doesn't actuate at the end of the travel. There's no play in the wheel, which is nice, where it connects to the motor, because as we'll see later, there's some play in other places that really piss me off and just distract you and take away from the feeling. It fits my hands extremely well. My right hand I generally hold up high, kind of Rubens Barrichello-esque. If you have a chance, I'd go to Fry's or Best Buy or something where they have steering wheels, and I would put my hands on each one and see which one fits my hands the best. You'll notice I have a button box over here, and this is mostly just because Codemasters has way too many controls. iRacing, R-Factor, Rally, I can get away with mostly just using the buttons on the steering wheel, and down here I use this for brake bias. But sometimes there's some miscellaneous things like this is my communications, this is to start my car. But in Formula 1, Codemasters has made it so that if you want to be top 1000, you have to change your ERS like 100 times every single lap. So I just went to a button box, $10 or less, make it yourself. Took me like 20 minutes just to solder the buttons on. I can show you how to do that if you want. But with the button box, I have ERS up, ERS down, diff opening, diff closing, those kinds of things. And then, like I said, brake bias up, brake bias down. I would say for the Codemaster games, that's not a con on the wheel, but they've made it so that I think you really need a button box, especially if you play cockpit mode, because then these two buttons, one's to look right, one's to look left. You don't have a single button just for looking behind you, because if you like simming in the cockpit, what the heck is reverse view? That doesn't exist. Moving on to the motor unit itself. Power just recently kind of ripped a little bit on the rubber, so I wrapped it with some electrical tape. That's not a con. In fact, that's probably a pro. It's lasted for a long time. I don't take care of my wires. I throw this thing around. Your pedals also connect in here, and these two are removable. But a con, I would say, is USB input is not removable. So they have removable cables except for the USB one, and that's kind of annoying to me, because if I want to run a longer USB cable out here, I don't have the option. I have to daisy chain the USB cables together, which isn't really an issue. You have to buy a female to male instead of just your standard male to male USB. So that's kind of an overview of, I don't know, the entire setup. Now let's get into some things about, notes about the durability and the reliability and things that have changed on the wheel and motor itself. So when I first got this, the calibration was much quieter and it didn't slam against the sides like it does now. Not a big deal. You do it once and it's not that loud. It's not like you're waking up your neighbors, right? You do notice that it didn't stop right in the center. That's not a big deal. It did used to stop dead center every single time after calibration, but it doesn't anymore. Over time, I've noticed that the wheel has gone slightly off center. It doesn't bug me because anybody who tracks their car, drives a race car, knows that the wheel is never centered. Depending on your setup, the tires, the wear, the everything, the wheel won't be centered. It's no longer calibrated to be perfectly dead center. But once again, 6 years, a couple thousand hours of use, I can't blame it, especially when I'm someone who runs with 100 or more % of force feedback. Which leads me to, why do I not run 100% force feedback anymore? Because it's off-centered, it wants to be centered sometimes, and you'll notice when you're going down straights, it gets this little bit of vibration, and I'm sure some of you with some cheaper wheels and things like that have experienced that it's trying to center itself, but it doesn't want to. So I've lowered the force feedback, and I've actually put in a 1% dead zone at the top. And like I said, very minimal, 1% dead zone, and I don't notice anything. And then I don't get the shaking. From running that high of a force feedback, I haven't noticed any issues with the belts or the gears. They don't whine, they don't make any noise, there's no crunching, there's no grinding. My G25 back in the day would get to the point where it's like when you're hitting things. This is very quiet when you're going over bumps. However, as people in the car scene will call it NVH, as you go to a higher force feedback and it's more direct, it's stronger, everything else that it's connected to will vibrate. So I often put my tea, black tea by the way, no milk. Milk in tea is disgusting. I probably just offended so many of you Brits and people out there, but I mean, if it's a chai tea or a Thai tea, you know, and definitely a coffee or something like that, okay, you can put some milk in it. Put milk in your tea? Come on, that's disgusting. Anyways, I put my tea up here on this just to soften it a bit so it doesn't spill when it's full, and then you definitely notice that your table moves quite a bit and it actually shakes my monitor a little bit. So just know that if you're on wood floor and you don't have any sort of buffer between your wheel and the rest, if you're on like the second floor and someone's sleeping under you or like your living room's underneath, you're gonna hear it. I don't think that's necessarily a negative on ThrustMaster and on this wheel. The more direct you get and the stronger the motor, just the more vibration there's gonna be. I talked about some of the cons of the pedals. I talked about some of the things I don't like in the motor. That being said, it has stood up extremely well. I don't notice the motor overheating. The fan does come on a little bit earlier, but it's probably because there's just some dust in there. But it's never overheated and shut off on me. It's never been intermittent. It always works every single time. I've never had issues configuring controls for Assetto Corsa, iRacing, R-Factor 1 and 2. I've used this wheel in Counter-Strike. Just for fun. So I have yet to find a game, whether it says partial wheel support or full wheel support, that this doesn't work for. So you've seen how everything has worn. I would say this is extremely durable. Like, I have no problem hitting it. When I take it off, I just take it off and I don't throw it, but I just toss it down there on the carpet. I don't really take that good care of the unit itself. Like I said, I do wipe down the wheel, but that's about it. The biggest flaw I've found in the wheel is the mounting. This is the OEM This is the mount that it comes with, and it screws into the bottom, and then you see you have the two legs that hold up against here. And that worked great for 5 years. It's a long time, you know, 5 years, it's good. But there are some things that have worn down. So the center of this, it's almost a perfect circle now. It used to be more chamfered, but there's a lot of wear on the inside that has just been, you know, over time, and this thing vibrates and it just wears around on the metal. And then whatever kind of steel they use for this, it's clearly not grade 8, because I've had to retap this a couple times. You can see that the threads are completely worn. Yeah, you have this entire screw to mess with, but if you're using the same thickness of table every single time you play, the engagement point is going to be in the same exact spot every single time. So the threads are going to wear down there. I have tried taking this apart multiple times, and they make it almost impossible to get it all separated. And then when you get in there to see if you can replace where this screws in, whether you cut it off and weld a nut in there, right? Like, I'm talking full DIY. I am willing to weld to fix this. No, it's impossible. You cannot replace the point that this mounts to. And there's wear on the nut, and there's wear on the screw. So I can actually just stick this in there and slide it up and down. It's very disappointing. I do like the mounting system. I think it worked out pretty well. But after 5 years of use, I have to trash it. So I just have just a knob. These are M6s, I think, which is good. Standard M6. Don't deal with that stupid SAE crap. And it just screws in like that, and it works fantastic. Except that because they're using such small screws, and where they're mounted like in the middle. I don't understand. They should have like 2 at the front and 2 in the back, because you can see, look at this play. Look at that. The up and down play. It's almost unbearable. So what I've actually done is I have put a Velcro strip on there, and it helps a little bit, but you could still see how much movement there was when this is mounted. I would have preferred if the hard mounts took beefier screws, and if there were potentially maybe 3 of them, you know, 2 down here, 1 in the middle, or 4 of them, 2 up here, 2 down there. I just think there needs to be more mounting, because you're already having a third of the wheel and very heavy part of the wheel because the steering wheel is attached to it, hanging off, that you can't mount to the tables. And this is probably the main reason I want to upgrade, or potentially even just side grade and buy another one of these. I haven't made up my mind, but it is that good. I would buy another one of these, especially for 6 years of using this. That's $50 a year. I'd buy 2 of these in 6 years because it's so worth it. But yeah, I mean, that's my biggest negative to this setup, is the mounting. It's just not as solid as I would like. And I know you noticed how, you know, this is a curved table, so I cut that flat. So you may be thinking that, well, it's the table and the way it's mounted because I'm doing it on a desk and not on a cockpit kind of setup. But I'll overlay a picture here. This is a PVC cockpit that my dad and I made back in like 2010. And I still have it. I just, in my current living situation, I don't have room for it. But even on that setup, wiggle. It is what it is. And like I've mentioned before, it's not much play, but it's enough to drive you mad. And once again, that only started to come up in the past maybe 6 months. So 5.5 years of perfect mounting, and then the mounting system gave up. So all in all, I think that I've definitely gotten my use out of this, plus some. And like I said before, I wouldn't be opposed to just maybe side grading to the newer version of this. The T500 still exists, but honestly, I don't really think the T500 is worth it when this is still available. So yeah, hopefully that kind of helped. I know that was a little disorganized, but hopefully that gave you an idea of the pros and cons and the life you should expect out of your T300RS. Once again, I haven't tried all the wheels in the world, but to me, this is the best entry level kind of just step up from entry level, because you're starting to get the belts and you're moving away from gears. Overall, I've been extremely happy with this, and I would recommend this wheel to anybody. Just keep in mind some of the things I said and take care of your wheel. You should be good for many, many years.